It's a privilege. It's always a privilege to share one's work, and it's an honor to be able to share it at an AI event with peers, especially after what I saw over the last 2 days of presentations. As mentioned, Rob and I started our practice in 1990. We're small. We've been about on average 10 to 12 people. Is that our feedback? Is that okay?
No, you're good.
Okay, sorry. And we've been very fortunate because they've been very, very talented employees without whom none of the work I'm going to show you today would even be possible. But ever since starting our practice, we've done a wide range of things, but we've always been preoccupied with domestic space. We started off doing kitchen and bathroom renovations in New York City that grew to the apartment renovations, and then they'd move out and we'd do a brownstone for them, and then ultimately summer house, and then we'd start doing some single family homes. So today I'm going to show you some single family homes. And the homes I'm going to show you are all based on this idea, this theory, this concept we call the modern modular. I just want to say that our design intent has always been, whether it's our single family homes or our apartment renovations. Again, none of this work are for developers. They're always for private clients, individual homes for private clients. And so today I'm going to share with you some of these explorations that we're trying to find, as I guess all of us are we've been preoccupied for the last 15 years to try to find a way to build a better modern home that's faster and cheaper to build. So what's funny is that, although academically, or in the academy, it's been talked about earlier today, the single-family home has been historically, a focal point of exploration for architectural ideas, but the reality is most people do not live in a single-family home designed by an architect. So this process, this idea, this concept I want to show you, before showing the work, I want to show some of the ideas behind it. And as probably many of you know, many architects over the last 100 years have pursued this, what we call the holy grail of modernism. That is to design a relatively affordable, modern home that could be mass produced, yet, few have achieved. There's been varying degrees of success, right? Frank Lloyd Wright, Korb, Bucky Fuller, Breuer, just a few that have sort of participated in this space over time, and there's a lot of buzz, especially in the magazines or in the blogs or whatever we call it these days, about prefab again. It just seems to always, somebody's pouring more gasoline on the embers of prefab because it's been around forever and ever. So we stepped outside of the academy and started doing research into the companies that are actually building homes. You don't see a lot of it in Florida, but if you go up into the Northeast and you drive down the highways, especially in Pennsylvania, you see these big boxes on the back of trucks, and you're like, where the hell did they come from? Who's making them and where they're going? So when we started looking into this idea about how we can maybe build, more efficiently, we started doing some research. And basically, in this realm of prefab, you hear this word out there, prefabrication. For the single-family home in America, there's basically 3 tiers. At the low end of the spectrum is the manufactured housing. It's governed by HUD. It's low cost and low flexibility, but it's a very affordable option for many Americans for a single-family home. Paul Rudolph, I used it as a building block conceptually to build or to conceive a number of projects. I actually built one a long time ago. At the high end of the spectrum is what we call panelized or kit aparts. There's a higher level of flexibility in terms of design if the architect wants to participate, but also it comes with a higher level of cost. We've built at least 24 of those homes and found that at the end of the day, if you get the right contractor and do the right set of drawings, it's a comparable cost. Especially the entity selling you the package, they put a tax and tip on it, and it starts to step outside in terms of a relatively affordable home. But right in the middle of this tier is the modular industry. It adheres to all the local codes. They're basically large boxes like Legos, about 80% complete, built in the factory, put on the back of the truck and shipped to the site. And what we have found, having done a number of projects, that we think this is the highest value proposition, or at least relative to the numbers in the houses that we've been building for the last 15 years. But the limits of the modular industry are many. One of the most critical is the dimension, determined by the Department of Transportation in terms of what can be shipped down the highway. And basically, the highest common denominator is about 16 feet wide, about 11 feet tall, The length varies depending on the physical space of each factory, but the highest common denominator would be about 60 feet. Typical factory widths are like 12 feet, 14 feet, and 16 feet. So it's with that experience of having done so many specifically long linear loft spaces in New York City that we felt a kindred spirit with these limits of the modular industry, of literally, as a natural extension of our practice, literally thinking inside the box. So designing from the inside out, we started to develop a series of potential layouts that embrace these limits, creating these linear 16-foot wide bars we call modules of use. And very simply, we thought of communal modules, kitchen, dining, living, and private modules, bedrooms and bathrooms, and then even I think we have some accessory modules. We actually call them saddlebags of stairs or storage or a variety of items. So after a series of investigations, we began to compose these things, and they begin to evolve into 7 basic forms or types or alphabets, if you will, in G. So each one's thought of as a series. There's 7 of them. These aren't limited. They're capable of expanding and contracting as needed. So, like for example, the most basic type is a single bar. So if all the essential elements of domesticity could fit into it, which this is about 1,000 square feet, it could be a 2-bedroom, 4-bedroom, depending on the use, depending on where it is a full-time home and as a weekend home. So great, put everything in it, pick it up, ship it to the site conceptually. Right, as the program expands, simply combine boxes. Right, this would be a double wide. Right, depending on the site's topography, the client's program, the solar orientation, potential views, the approach, we get a T or an L. Program expands, we get a courtyard. My favorite, the Z, the triple wide. And then within each one of these, we begin to modify relative to the site. If it's more compact, it might be a little bit tighter. We start to punch a piece out to pick up a view, bring in light into the courtyard. But the idea is, which is a little bit obvious, is that by manipulating the various types, we get these unlimited 3-dimensional massing strategies. And of course, there are corresponding 2-dimensional plans. But again, they're all based on these conceptual building blocks we call modules of use. They're not modules of implementation. They're not physical building blocks. They're conceptual building blocks. And as such, they have their own inherent dimensional logic. And these are derived from common elements most often needed for domesticity. Furniture, fixtures, cabinets, appliances. Common elements with standard dimensions from which we found emerging patterns. We use these patterns as regulating lines to configure the basic components, and it's the aggregate of these components that become the modules of use. So although this sort of strategy, this way of thinking is heavily dependent upon dimension, it is a descriptive process. It's not a prescriptive set of rules to follow. So there's strategies, there's guidelines, there's ways of thinking so we can begin to recognize these different patterns in terms of dimensions and how we begin to organize space. The diagrams here just start to show how we started layering as well common off-the-shelf materials. I think the one on the left are 8-foot sliders and the one on the right are 6-foot sliders, and the space between them, it's not 6 inches or 12, it's actually 8, so we could do 2 jack studs, 2 inches of space, get the outlet in, 2 more studs and get the other window, so it alleviates putting any of the any of the outlets in the floor, because you all know that every 12 feet you need the outlet. And when you build them in the factory, you go over extra scrutiny in terms of it getting approved, because the inspectors actually come to the factory. But then it's the aggregate of the modules of use that actually become the typologies. And so here's one of many. It's a matrix, exploring the 3D massing opportunities, when organized by size and type. And so, It's really was inspired, and it's analogous, actually, for those of you that remember Korb's panel exercise, which he explores these 2-dimensional compositions based on proportion, measurement and limits. It's the same strategy, at least in my mind. At least this is the way I'm thinking about it. But basically, the 7 basic types are arranged vertically on the left, and they grow in size as they move from left to right by increments of about 500 square feet in both 1-story and 2-story configurations. Again, these aren't models. These aren't designs. This isn't something you choose. It's a way so that I know whomever comes to us to do a project, I know we can do it with an X amount of square footage, and it actually is factory friendly. Excuse me. So as we went through these studies and our research and thinking about it, we were having a lot of fun, and we ended up with these resultant typologies or concepts representing the potential of this way of thinking, which again we labeled the modern modular. So here's some we're starting to play with, pulling the roofs up to get some extra light for the clear stories. We started using off-the-shelf stock dimensions for sliders and windows, because you all know, it's cheaper for a fixed unit than it is an operable one, and if the operable one's stock, you know that it's cheaper than one that's custom. So in the fall of 2002, a lot of our research started literally right after 9/11. All of our work went on hold, everything. We had to lay everybody off. I think Rob and I, we only had 2 employees left. And this was bubbling sort of the summer before that. And we just sort of we had no work, so we just put our heads into this in terms of doing research and thinking about it. And about, around mid or the end of 2002, we posted all the stuff on our website, these different strategies. And basically, we're featuring a number of developed types and case studies, something we call our, portfolio of capabilities. They're intended not as models to be purchased, but examples of what can be created with this system. A design system intended to create custom modern homes using mass production techniques. That is literally the definition of mass customization. We're serving economies of one. It's sort of a new way of thinking where you don't keep pumping out the same exact product and expect everybody to buy the exact same thing. Back in the early 90s, there's sort of this new way of thinking and terminology. And I happened to attend a conference to the guy who literally coined the term and wrote the books about it. And he went on and on and on about the way mass customization is Starbucks. You can order the coffee you want, and they make it for you. As architects, you know that just about everything we do is a custom design using various mass production techniques. So as architects, we have a lot of knowledge and inherent processes that we use every day that I think that if we expand our sort of vision a little bit, we can leverage some existing technologies that are out there. It's just that sometimes we participate in the academy and we don't approach sort of this lowbrow way of making things. And in, I think, early 2003, we were invited to participate in an international competition to design a modern prefabricated home that could be mass-produced. It was the only competition that I'm aware of that was for a single-family home. It was for real clients, a real site, a real budget, and it actually got built. This was, some of you might remember, it was a dwell home competition. It was quite some time ago. But this, fortunately, we won, and it shined really, really big, bright light on what we were doing, and in general, sort of the prefab sort of sparked a movement with a number of my peers in terms of some of us that have been interested in this. But we submitted a design, again, based on our concept, our idea. We have a kitchen, living, dining room, this big sort of freestanding loft up here. Stair volume is here. He is an entrepreneur that works from home, works from the office up here. He goes out to the deck on phone calls. She's a retired lawyer. She's like in her 20s and has decided to become a violin teacher. And so she works at home. So the moms and the kids come and they come. She teaches, violin here, and he works out of here. And there was a, walkout basement, so they're future kids and all this. So when we had it priced, originally pricing was coming to about $75 a foot. At the end of the day, I think all in, it was about $250. The competition was for $200,000, and we took out the occupied basement and that front little nose, and our client ended up paying $206,000 for the entire project. There's lots of stories that go with that, and there's lots of qualifications to that. But instead of showing you the completed projects of this one, I'm going to show you other completed projects that embrace the same ideas, the same concepts. Some of the same ways we're thinking about the nature of the detailing of the windows and such. But before I show you the pretty pictures, I want to talk about the process, because that's the other thing in the space of prefab. A lot of people show pretty renderings or pretty pictures, and they don't talk a lot about the nitty-gritty. So I just want to talk a little bit about the process. As architects, we're hired as architects. We charge 15% of the construction cost for architectural services, and we follow it all the way through. In phase one, we spent a lot of time with the client. We designed the whole thing, soup to nuts, and we produce a set of drawings that goes to the factory that kicks off phase two. We get a pricing set. During phase two, we do a lot of coordination and engineering with the factory because, like I said, the inspectors come to the factory, so we have to submit a buttload of documents for approval, structural, energy codes, a whole series of things. During phase two, we're also completing a set of drawings for the on-site work that we then find 3 to 5 local guys and go out to bid. So by the end of phase two, 8 months into the process, we have our numbers, our contracts all lined up, we have our local permits, and we have our state permits. We're all ready to go. Phase three starts deposit to the factory. The factory starts procuring all the pieces. It takes about 8 to 10 weeks to get everything there. It's online for another 2 to 4 weeks, and while that's happening, the GC is digging a hole, putting in the foundation, septic well, prepping the site to receive the boxes. Then the things are shipped to the site, put on a foundation, it kicks off the final 4 months of the on-site completion. We sort of estimated it's about 6 weeks worth of work. That takes about 16, so we can manage our clients' expectations. We're doing a number of larger and much more complicated projects these days, and it's taking a little bit longer, but I'll show you a little bit taste of that. So the design process is very similar. We do due diligence, zoning, understand the setbacks, FAR, whatever it is. A lot of places we build on the eastern end of Long Island, there's pyramid rules, there's all kinds of limits in terms of what you can and cannot do. We go through the sketching, the modeling, the rendering, and we go through the entire process. We have a number of our favorites. We sort of whittled them down when we first started this thing. The factory is only capable of doing so many things, so the choices were very, very limited. And now, as we've been doing this and working with one particular factory, they've been able to expand what they're capable of doing, so much so that other factories are having a hard time keeping up. But we specify everything, every appliance, every light, every dimmer, every toilet paper holder, the whole thing. And then, of course, the factory does a set of shop drawings. Everybody knows what those are for, so that we know that they know that we know that they know we know what it is that we're trying to do. They're redrawn. They're not very technical savvy. In fact, the first time we tried working with a factory, we gave them a set of drawings. We had to ship them to them. And this was probably 2002, I think, the first 2003. And we get a set of drawings back in 2 weeks, and it's not what it is that we drew. Well, that's because the guy, the drafter, the engineer, would look at our drawing and draw it, and the windows don't line up, the walls don't line up. We're like, dude, what happened? He goes, well, you would scale it, or why didn't you import it? They didn't know how to do that. So when you talk about BIM or sort of the full integration of sort of computer, this is all really low-key stuff. It's really sort of. But over time, we've developed a series of standards, and it's really important because the factories it's assembly line methodology, which means that the boxes move and the guys stay in the same place. And it's really important we don't muck it up, sort of literally throw a wrench into the gears, if you will, because then the factories don't want to work with you, and that's usually why they don't work with architects anyway, because some of us are rather arrogant, egocentric assholes from New York and expect them to be able to build anything. And what you learn after you go to several factories, that you turn a few off, and so your partner says, let me take this one next time. And but we've been able to talk our way into a number of factories, and then after a few years and a few little press, now they call us. But in America, there's about 200 modular factories in the country. The highest quantity and the highest quality exist in the Northeast, obviously because of the building season, right, and the labor rates, there's not as much time. And predominantly in Pennsylvania, literally right in our backyard. We didn't know that until we went all over the country visiting factories everywhere, but when we found out, it was like a gold mine. The further west and south you go, they literally vaporize in terms of quantity and quality. There's not one I can list off the top of my head that's in Florida that we could just tap into or call. And you get all the way out to California, they really don't exist. My peers have had to sort of invent them, make them, build them, if they actually wanted to build a high quality modern home, because the fulfillment partners, they're not there, at least not in the same numbers from whom you can learn. So an average factory, They probably 15 to 18 stations. The house is moved twice a day. 1 to 3 boxes are out the door a day, so that's 515 a week. They claim to build 200 to 400 homes a year, depending on who you talk to or what numbers you read. It's between 4 and 12% max of the amount of single-family homes that are built this way. The stations begin. They do things simultaneously. The top left image there. They're building the walls. They build them horizontally. If you notice the sheetrocks on them, they build from the inside out, and it's pretty interesting. So while they're building the walls horizontally there on the left, see it over here, then they flip them up, they pick them up, and they stack them. While that's happening, they're building the floor, right? Nowadays in our houses, we do all open web joists. Before it was only 2x10s. There's a whole series of things. It's taken us 15 years to improve, but we've been able to elevate the game slowly over time. They pick up the walls, they move them right over. They pick them up and they put them into place. Notice there's no levels, there's no lasers, there's no nothing. It's literally pieces going next to each other. But they build it from the inside out, which is interesting because now they can come and start doing the electric from the outside. So while the guys are inside doing the plumbing and everything, they can start wiring from the exterior, and then the insulation goes on from the outside, so things can happen simultaneously. That's how they're able to build it so quickly. I show this image because this was the model we submitted for the Dwell Home competition, and it took us 2 weeks to build this thing by hand, but I show you this image here. The dude up here, he's like standing right there. So this was 4 days in the factory, both built by hand. But then when it starts moving down the line space, installing mechanical, electrical, plumbing, cabinets, counters, fixtures, tile. When we started, they didn't even put in tile. So we're doing custom millwork now, we're doing custom windows. So in the beginning, it was a slow build. So work is being done on the inside and outside at the exact same time. It's a really low-tech operation. You're thinking, like, where are all the machines, man? Where's everything? Again, it's very low-tech, but incredibly efficient. I mean, if you notice, earlier today, I think we saw, the suction cups putting in the glass and everything. No, these are just a bunch of blokes under a shed building houses. But again, in 2 to 4 weeks online, it's ready to go out the door. I just point this out. One of the things we're learning about in terms of efficiency is being able to put 2 boxes on one line space to carry the chassis like this, because one of the things that we've really learned is about, in terms of monies, is leveraging that line space. That's a little bit too much into the weeds, but we continue to learn things, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and improve upon what we're doing. And then they're shipped up, wrapped out moved out into the yard, sometimes for another week or two while some finishing touches are being done, and while the factory's fabricating the house, the on-site GCs, foundation, septic, well, utilities, preparing the site. Next day, usually at sunrise. So usually factories will ship, within 8 hours, so the driver can take the boxes and return. And when you actually study the factories in the Northeast, it's like an 8-hour drive. So we're trying to figure out, why are you licensed to build in these states and not the others? And it's just something that's been happening over time. They don't really think about it, they just do things. But usually then a large crane, they show up at sunrise with a qualified set crew. It picks them up and puts them into place. So this thing is 16 feet wide, 11 high, 60 feet long. It's about 40, 50 pounds a square foot, so that's about 20, 25 tons. I know you can't see it, but in the early days, that's my partner Rob up there making sure, and our other guys actually have the ropes. Because in the early days, they wouldn't put them in the right place. We had to be there, so we had to be there all the way through. We were there at the factory, we were there at the set. You guys think, residential, I think Peter Gluck was talking about how bad contractors are. So the foundations they're so much better than the guys in the factory, but we have a plan, a methodology, a strategy, a way of doing things, so the expectations, we all know what they are. Foundations vary due to the design intent, the soil conditions, the site constraints. Most common is a poured, below grade poured concrete basement. In the south, I think you guys like to do block quite a bit. Sometimes we wrap them, with stone, or we have to do concrete piers pinned to the rock, or even steel frames on concrete grade beams on helical piles when the soils require it. And then setting of the boxes kicks off phase 4. So again, in addition to the set in the factory, our team is there on site doing construction administration all the way through. And while the connections for the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing are happening, the siding and the decking are happening on the outside. And while work's happening on the outside, the flooring, appliances, painting, any hardware, everything's being completed on the interior. But so like at the factory, things are happening simultaneously inside and out. The bathrooms are the most complete when they're delivered. So for example, the only thing done that was not in the factory was the shower rod, these hooks, the soap, and the soap dish. Everything else was done in the factory. It's a pretty sparse, this is like one of the smallest bathrooms we've done, but it's pretty standard just in terms of subway tile, glass tile, Zuma tubs, Duravit fixtures. We use a lot of Kohler. Actually, the medicine cabinet we did on site because it was cheaper than the factory putting it in. Again, the bedrooms as well, they're small, efficient, just big enough. We got this thing about having done so many small apartments in New York City, I hate little rooms for clothes. A lot of people's closets are as big as apartments in New York City, so we often sort of accommodate everybody's stuff by attempting to pack it into some millwork and that way try to articulate the space. So again, this notion of articulation as opposed to accommodation. For us, I know Frank Lloyd Wright said the hearth is sort of the center of the home, but for us, the kitchen is the plan generator. For us, the kitchen is, the command center for 21st century domesticity, and life revolves around that kitchen island, whether we want to or not, and where do the parties always end up? In the kitchen. Often on access opposite, we'll do the fireplace. All of them now are heat generating, so we're actually generating heat. They make some incredible products these days, but it's a freestanding long linear loft. We wrap it with as much glass as we can afford. We wrap it with glass to have the strong connection to the exterior to bring in as much light. And the views, often the sites we have when we're doing single family homes, we try to really leverage whatever we have. And also, because we do so much work in the city, often we just have windows at one side. To have glass on, two ends is amazing, but to get a corner, to be able to turn a corner, we don't get to do that very often in New York City. So for us, we kind of have a hard time not turning the corner with glass. We use a lot of custom built-ins to maximize the storage, efficient use of space. Here's an example, one of the interior window details. Here we got all the built-ins, the flooring, everything in the factory. These are just stock cabinets, kitchen cabinets that we use for the bedrooms. Factory always got a kick out of that. Here's some standard window details and siding, and awnings and entry canopies and brise-soleils, screened porches and outdoor showers, storage sheds and trellises and carports, garages, pool houses. So we leverage the factory for what they do well. And it's been a learning thing over time, but basically they can do volumes or panels, walls of panels. So any of the trellises or the siding and the exterior work, we'll always do it on site. We'll never ask the guys in the factory to be able to do it. They don't have the skill to be able to do it. So for example, here's an example of the Saddlebag Module. Sorry about that one. And it's basically two boxes, one on top of each other. They're 6 feet wide. So in the factory, they built them side by side. For the first, half a dozen projects or something, we built those saddlebags as panels because the factory couldn't figure out, it's obvious, right, how you would build it and stack it, but they couldn't figure out how to put it on the line space, not to muck everything else up. And it took about, a little while, but they're coming up with ideas too to be able to help the efficiency. This one's clad with, cement board panels to demarcate the auto court. Very similar house in the Catskills. It's the same saddlebag stair, except it's clad with a local bluestone, and the difference is, like the house before, the two boxes on top of each other, the one in Peconic Bay, the communal space is upstairs because we can see, so you can see the water. They're both 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a media room, exact same size house. But the one in the Catskills, the communal space is on the ground, so you have access to the nice landscape. And the upper private module shifted back and allows deck space above the communal space and allows for a screened porch at the back end. And we get a screen wall over here because there's a path. We didn't know it until we started the process that everybody from everyone has like 10 acres. They all happen to walk down here and take some special trail that didn't know until all these people started walking by. And that's why the screen porch gets a little more dense right here. But it's in the middle of the woods in the Catskills, and all of a sudden you find strangers walking 20 feet close to the house. This one is clad in a corrugated metal with a Kynar finish to be as maintenance free as possible to deal with the harsh winters. This is a cabin in Vermont. It sits in the clearing on the highest point of a 200-acre mountain that our retired clients purchased in the middle of Green Mountain National Forest. It's literally in the middle of nowhere. The house is completely off the grid, and it's powered by solar photovoltaic panels and storage batteries. We found it to be more cost-effective to go completely off the grid than to bring power to this remote location. And while the average home in America, you guys probably know, I think, sucks about 10,000 kilowatt hours a year, this house is designed to consume about 3,300. Each house is engineered, individually designed and engineered to exceed the local energy codes. All the houses are designed to lead standards. Now, these days, we're capable of working with the factory. All of them have LED lighting, low-flow plumbing fixtures, high-performance windows. We developed our own special flash and bat insulation system, meaning because they build from the inside out, or we design from the inside out, they build, and then from the outside in, we begin to work. In other words, because the sheetrock's there, we spray 2 inches of closed-cell foam, and then do R13 of bat. And the reason being, if we fill the entire cavity in the factory, which we tried once, it literally gums up the works, because you guys know you got to scrape all the other crap off of it. Well, you can't keep the boxes moving down the line if somebody's got to come up and sweep up the insulation. So it took us a few projects, but we learned, they carry the little jet packs now. I don't know if you guys have seen them, right? Well, back when we started it, they didn't. So they just blow 2 inches. We get an R12 plus the 13. The infiltration's fantastic. It's a much cheaper way of doing it, and it's not a mess. But, and we also put in these high performance, these high velocity hydro-air mechanical systems. Often we have radiant heat. Like I said, we get heat generating fireplaces. They're engineered for the snow loads, for specifically wherever they are, and of course also the solar gain. Like some of the earlier typologies that we're studying, where we started playing with the facades, or especially the roofs, and sort of picking them up. This house is in Wisconsin, and like I said, the 11-foot high mark for the boxes, which means a foot of structure for the floor, a foot of the structure for the ceiling, typically leaves us with 9-foot high ceilings. This one, when one stays on system. So, for example, here, in being in Wisconsin, the path from the factory to the site, we're able to get 12-foot high ceilings here. I'm sorry about that. Point being, these were 2 boxes, 2 16-foot boxes side by side, and this was built like this in the factory, and that was built like this in the factory. We showed up on site, the set crew sistered in all the overhangs very quickly, so the whole thing was watertight in a day. It was set and watertight in one day. So depending on where one is and the capability in the factory and the actual access, the route to get the boxes there can give you some leniency in terms of what those limits are. Where in this butterfly roof, the shipping heights were such that this one was its own module. So that was one box. This was another box. The one below was another box. So we had 3 line spaces. This saddlebag was actually panelized. This was one of the earlier projects that, again, the factory had no idea what we're doing nowadays. They would never touch this thing for us. When we built this in 2005, all in, septic well, driveway clearing, everything was $400,000. Sometimes, we lift the house up to be able to park underneath it or get a storage unit underneath it and a screened porch for entry. No steel, it's all wood. We try to design all the steel out of it and use shear walls with wood. Sometimes we lift the house, we rotate it, sort of form this sort of view to the water upon arrival by car. This notion of threshold is very important to us. Sometimes it's a big entry portal to the site itself, to this Zen garden in the back. It's important to us to have this really strong connection to the site and to nature. So this is the entry for everybody coming, and all the friends come over and kids run back to the pool house. Entry to the house is actually here on the side, but this big mouth opening is this big receiver to bring everybody to the Zen garden in the back. Sometimes the space is more intimate. It's like a little room accessible only from inside the house. But again, here we're sort of like pulling nature back into the house. So this little plane floats up above sort of the slope and actually get a sense of literally being in the trees. Here's another one in Connecticut. In addition to leveraging the exterior space, created beneath and in between boxes, we always try to leverage the space on top of boxes. Again, they are made relative to their limits, if you will. So the aesthetic is somewhat reflects the limits by which they're made. And so on the horizontal surface, we get some gathering spaces, and it's usually located right above the communal module below, sharing the fireplace volume. And if we're not using it for decks or it's a green roof or solar panels, we often use solar panels. We often do solar and geothermal as supplemental energy sources. We've done about a half a dozen houses now where we've been able to use it as a co-generational system, and our houses are actually generating more energy than they consume. So, we have this other preoccupation, this other dream, naively, that, every house could be a producer of energy as opposed to a consumer. It would profoundly change, our foreign policy. It would profoundly change our economy. And I think we as architects, the technology, you saw Angie and Larry talk about solar panels. The technology exists. So I think it's upon us to sort of bring these things to the table. But we always recommend our clients always to do net metering to tie it back to the grid, so anything in excess they sell back, because that's cheaper to do than buying the batteries and these Telsa batteries. Has anybody been able to get them yet? So quickly, I'm going to show you 5 projects from simple to complex. I'm going to try to highlight some similarities and differences. First one's in Connecticut. It's a small house. It's 832 square feet. It's designed as a simple getaway. The size was determined by the budget. It's basically a freestanding loft with a kitchen at one end, the sleeping zone at another, and they're separated, connected by this bathroom core wrapped in 14 gauge hot rolled steel, a sort of a favorite material we've used for quite some time now. And in that core, it has a bath, sauna, laundry, the mechanicals, the audio equipment, heat generating fireplace. So all the stuff is sort of packed into there. The pool is literally the same footprint as the house. Yeah, we're about to put the box on the pool foundation. So it's cool. There's no air conditioning. It's just radiant heat. Again, it's designed as a summer house. They open it all up. The breezes go up. They go across the pool and through the house to the clear stories in the back. It was designed as a dream house for empty nesters from Manhattan, and they'd go up here and spend the weekend. and they'd invite their friends up on the train. They'd come and entertain and party all day long at the pool, and then they'd send them back home on the train. That's why the thing looks like a big, giant boombox. It's just like it's a little mini party house, sort of their dream. And then we're going to jump from rural Connecticut to a little more dense fabric in the Bronx. So the size of this house was determined by the zoning limits. You know, the building footprint in which we were allowed to build was 18 by 52. The house we just saw was 16 by 52. So here we stacked 2 boxes. We had private spaces, 2 bedrooms and 2 baths upstairs. It's a full-time home for parents and their 16-year-old. And then we, because we had 18 feet, we got this 2-foot by 40-foot zone, the saddlebag of all cabinetry. So of storage, you come in, you can put your keys and your wallet and everything here, and there's coats and hang up, and here's the pantry, the fridge, and the dining room, and the living room, and the TV, and the fireplace. You go up the stairs, there's a little office carved in, and then all kinds of storage, again with a TV and fireplace and the master at the back. And the husband said he met more neighbors on the day of the set than he had in the previous 20 years of living in the neighborhood. So that's the first box going in. You see it all open on the side because that's where the saddlebag's coming. Watch all the bits and pieces and everything coming out of the second box. See the way they stored them from the factory? Those are all the panels. And they picked this up and put it in here as well. Now, one thing, notice that you see these are the panels that they just took out of the box so they can get up into the house. They're using it for circulation as well. But so the wife missed it because she was deployed to Iraq right after our design phase, which sent everybody into so we went on hold for a while. But, you know, fortunately she returned home safely to a brand new home that replaced this existing home that had outlived its intended purpose. You know, due to the new FEMA regulations, the house sits higher than all of its neighbors. Due to the skyline zoning regulations of New York City, you know, that's why we get the slope on the bulkhead to get us up to the roof. And then we get these grandstand stairs that sort of come out of the living room and go down to the water. So when you're inside the living room and you're looking out, it looks like an infinity deck because you just see the water behind it, and it's the Throg's Neck's Bridge. A lot of our work now is tear downs and replacing the house. We've found that it's more cost effective to completely replace the house with a modular than it is to upgrade. It's another reason why we started doing some research into this, because we had done quite a few additions and renovations outside the city, and we're shocked with how much work. So anything that was over 30 years old, we found that we had to replace the windows, the mechanical systems, the electrical systems, the insulation wasn't up to speed. We just found it was a much higher value proposition. And we only know this too by having done a few of these. So I'm going to jump from the Bronx back up to Connecticut. It's just outside a quaint little New England town of Norfolk. The house, the site sits on a bluff. There's a spiral driveway approach that existed. There was an existing house on the site. We burned it down and had the local fire department come and put it out, and our client got a tax break because they got to practice on it. So, like I said, the house is organized such that the rooms all have this view towards Haystack Mountain, and on top of Haystack Mountain, which sits here, the site is here, there's a little teeny tower. It's a watchtower that was built in the 30s for forest fires, and they'd go up there and sit and watch. Well, it's the highest point in the area, so everybody from the town can see the local landmark, and they know where it is. So it's nice where people come up and they spiral up and they come through, and they get the view on axis with the local landmark. And like the Bronx, you know, it's a bar. It's a box on a box, bar on a bar. In terms of the private spaces are upstairs and communals downstairs, yet it's just rotated 90 degrees, the perpendicular relationship. And then instead of 2 simple modules, you know, these are broken up into several in terms of maximizing the line space. And as opposed to putting them side by side, we get some that are end to end. And this is for a young family from Brooklyn. This is their summer home. So a lot of people that live in small, tight spaces in the city have a house outside where they get a place for the kids to get out and get some fresh air. That was the arrivals side. This is on the back end. The glass box there is the communal space. And it sits, with its view. You can see the Haystack Mountain in the distance. You can't see the little watchtower, though. And this is the living room they use in the summer. So there's the glass box is sort of the kitchen, dining, living in the winter. And this is kitchen, dining, living in the summer. The kitchen sits sort of at the cardo decumanus of not only both of those two seasonal rooms, but also the two boxes in terms of that center space. Green roof with some fire burning and stargazing. Master bedroom at the end of the hall. Guest bedroom below with the view. And again, like I said, all of our houses are designed to LEED standards. This is the first and only one that we got the star on our forehead. The time and the money and the effort, and we just found that our clients, they didn't find it. I can understand for a developer or for a larger project or a single family home, I don't think we're ever going to do it again. Because for those of you how many people design single family homes? So you know that some of these things are great and some of these others are like, really? So I'm going to jump from Connecticut to the eastern end of Long Island. The site's located on a long and linear barrier reef in the town of East Quogue. Our site is like someplace in here. And like many of the 15,000, 20,000 McMonster houses in the Hamptons, this next project I'm going to show you, it also has an ocean front lot. But instead of, this big guy, ours is like right there. He's like, he can almost like fit in this guy's pool. So the really limited footprint, it's what's called a flag lot. The setbacks, the pyramid rule, the footprint that we're allowed to build in was 52 by 26. The interior square footage was limited. It was about 2,200 square feet. Keeping in the low-tech attitude, these photos weren't from a drone. They were actually taken with a kite, with a camera on a kite by one of the guys in our office. And I just want to point out that in our office, not only do you work on the project, go through the whole process, you go to the factory, go to the set, go to the CA, but then you also get to hang out on the roof with the client drinking beers and flying kites. So the constraints were such that, I mentioned the 2,200 square feet, I think both, not only the exterior volume, but the interior volume was limited as well, because there was an old shack on the beach that got blown away, so it was grandfathered in terms we were allowed to rebuild on the site, but I'll show you in a second, we weren't allowed to build in the exact same position. But the fireplace on the right-hand side and the barbecue on the left-hand side, these are all sit within the 2-foot setbacks, given and about building on the dune, we were allowed to build a house on the dune, but we weren't allowed to walk on it. Therefore, the bridge. And then the stair here, you can see this also. So we filed this as a bay window, because you're allowed to cantilever 2 feet into the setback with a bay window. It just happens to hold our stair that takes us all the way up to the roof. And then you can see that same part here in the factory, the cantilever piece, and you can see it right here. It's basically a 2-story double wide, 4 boxes. And the plan is very simple, very clean. On the up the bridge, this communal space, kitchen, bathrooms, office, doubles as a 5th bedroom, covered dining area, barbecue. We illegally built this after the little piece on the sand. Up the stairs, a couple of guest bedrooms, a deck, master suite over here, bunk room, bedroom, master, and then up onto the roof. So you can see the dune that we had to replace right here. So you see the crest of the dune runs right here. The old house was right here. The waves blew it away. You can see how far the water's been coming up. But all the houses have to be back here. So we got this incredible view all the way down the coast, except we have that one spaceship sitting next to us right here looking to the east. But we had to rebuild the dune to get a permit to be able to build the house. The piers, they're like telephone poles, are driven 30 feet into the sand. It's a 2-story double wide. The first box has the communal spaces, living room and the dining room, the stair, kitchen, bathroom, office, laundry, bedroom, deck, bedroom, stair, bathroom, mechanical, bunk room. So the house was set in late December, and it was complete just in time for the summer. We were only allowed to build, in addition to the setbacks and the height and the volume, and we were only allowed to build on the dune from, I think it was from October to May, due to this nesting season for this particular bird of wildlife in the dune. So we had a very narrow window. So being able to build the house that quickly was a benefit to our client. He didn't lose a summer, which is really important to people that have houses like this out in the Hamptons. I think when we built this, it was about $350 a square foot. So you have to park the car to the right, you go up the stairs, right? And as you get this tease of the ocean, when you're here on the landing, you can see, because you just come up above over the dune, and you're able to see a little bit. And then you have this procession going across the bridge, and as you go up the bridge, you can look through these slot windows and see all the way through. But you enter through the slot, you get this revealing. This is what you see when you come right in. The fireplace to the left, to the east, actually blocks the view of the neighbor that's over there. And like I said, we've opened up the west end because we get these long views all the way down the coast. So because we had a 26-foot, allowable, this box, the living room box in which you see, it's only 14 feet wide, it's 9 feet tall, and the box next to it's only 12 feet. The kitchen's off to the right, it's tucked back, it's carved back, and the windows, these slot windows, offer a view to the north, to the bay, and there's just nothing. You're in the middle of what feels like the water. And then here's this Oculus deck. It's like a giant sundial. Literally, you can sit there and watch the day go by. And it sort of separates one of the guest bedrooms to the right, and the bunk room across the hall. All this cabinetry was built in the factory. And the master bedroom, it literally feels like you're sleeping on the beach. In the master bedroom, we weren't allowed to have an outdoor shower outside, so we actually put the windows such that it's as outdoor of a shower as we can on the second floor here. Stairs up to the roof. Again, the fireplace volume blocking the neighbor and wide open to the west. We get some incredible sunsets. It was designed to withstand 120-mile-an-hour winds. Thank goodness, because Hurricane Sandy came just a couple years or so after we finished the house. House survived. The house next to us was completely wiped out and blown into the side of ours, so we had to replace the chillers and the cement board. But the dune was completely washed away, exposing those piers like 10 feet. And he's since rebuilt the dune. Last house. This one sits on an island, Fisher's Island. Not your Fisher's Island, but the Fisher's Island up in the Long Island Sound off the coast of Connecticut. So the site, it's one of the few empty lots on Fisher's Island. In the summertime, the population swells to about 3,000. In the winter, it's like 300. It's a bluff. It rises gently up, and it's pretty steep over here. The house was sited to get the views, so we can look right past this house out to the Sound. It sort of sits wedged into this hill, and it allows a high point for entry. It sits in a meadow surrounded by these black locust trees. It's intended as a multi-generation home and a gathering destination. So it was 8 modules. The garage was site-built. The bulkhead was site-built. There's 4 levels, indoor and out. And again, while the house is being Fabricated. Here we did a prefabricated foundation just because of the timing and the cost and the risk of getting the concrete from the mainland to the island. We rode the ferry over with the crane on the morning of the set. You can see that the ferry is large enough to fit 16-foot wide boxes, but the gangplank was only 14-foot wide, so we had to design the boxes accordingly. So a nice foggy morning, crane shows up. We got a bedroom and a stair and a kitchen and an entry and a bedroom and a bathroom and a dining room and a living room and bedrooms, bathrooms, kids' bedrooms. So it's about 4,500 square foot of modules, and it's about 2,000 square feet in the lower level. This sort of the lifted plane creates a roof deck for entertaining. The guest wing's on the far right. The second level is like the entire family wing for the client and their 2 grown daughters that are just starting college. And the living room sort of bumps out at us, and the void over there is the entry for both people and cars. So the void on the right is where you come through, the outer court's to the right, defined by these stone walls. We got a chance to work with Hildebrand. They're landscape architects out of Boston. Like they did the plan for the mall renovation they've blown up recently, but back here they were still, small enough to work with us. There's a family room upstairs. The screen porch pushes back in. The kitchen sort of pushes out. So we have these push and pulls with the boxes creating these objects in these voids. Like the screen porch there, it's sort of covered space for the screen porch and also for a workshop below. Outside space. So there's these four levels of living inside and out. So our clients, they're now retired. They live in London during the winter, and they live here in the summer. They have this long family history on the island. The wife is one of 5 kids. They all have houses, spouses, kids, elderly parents, live nearby. And they've got this family ritual where everyone does their own thing during the day, and then at night everyone comes over to go up on the roof to have cocktails and watch the sunset, and everybody goes downstairs to have dinner. This is that portal entry to the right. There's an outdoor shower and storage on the left. Entry looking past the dining to the living. 14-gauge hot-rolled steel. That's the view, although you can't see it. Here the box is 20 feet wide. These are 2 14-foot boxes, so it's a living room is 20 by 28. A lot of the work we're doing right now is we're way past that 16-foot module planning strategy, and we're mixing and matching and slipping and sliding and doing a lot more fun things. This is teak cabinet. This is the screen porch looking out at the meadow. There's one of the fireplaces upstairs in the family room. It's a master bath and the master bedroom. And some of the detail, the open stairs lets the light all the way back. Stair up to the roofs. There's there's an interior stair up and the exterior stair up to the roof. The skylights let the light down into the girls' showers below. Here's the bulkhead with an interior stair, second way of getting up there. And on the other side of the bulkhead, we've got this outdoor space with an outdoor kitchen and the fireplace. Our client jokes that we literally built the house just to support the deck. Because literally the first time we went to the site, the 83-year-old father-in-law had his pickup truck on the top of the site. He'd done some clearing and put a 12-foot ladder on the back of the bed on top of boards, on top of concrete blocks, and he asked us to climb up and check out the great view. He did it, so we had to. But at the time, this was the most complex job we had done. Logistically, being on the island, getting the boxers there, getting the workers there. Technically, we did chillers, solar hot water, that we pumped through the radiant heat floors in the winter, because those of you know that if you don't keep the radiant heat moving, it burns out the tubes. They're not here in the winter time, so we're able to rechannel it and warm the floor. And then during the summer, they use it for dishes and showers. Structurally, it's hurricane rated, hurricane windows. Multiple boxes in the different directions. We had multiple consultants on this. This is the first time we did the LED lighting system with the factory. So there's a bunch of firsts on this one. But So this was a big milestone. This was a really big deal to us, sort of proving to us this idea, this theory that we could actually do this. And then the following year, we also had a big milestone because Princeton Architectural Press in 2013, I think they published about a dozen of our projects, showing the, which was a big milestone for us. So, showing the completed projects, the process of implementation, the ideas, behind the work. And since then, the projects have become, at one level, simpler and more complex. I mean, for example, the house I just showed you is only 8 boxes. To us, it was the most complex. We're just finishing a house on Shelter Island, also for an 83-year-old dude. It's a 1-bedroom house. It's 14 freaking boxes, but it's 1,100 square feet and has 1 bedroom. It's one of the reasons we designed it very, very, very efficiently. It was only 3 boxes, and then the guy wants what he wants, and it's okay. We have some clients like that, not many, and he wanted us to carve up into the roof, so I don't have that one with me. But what I'm saying, some of them we're doing 320 square foot little tiny homes right now. We're doing some micro units. We're also doing a 10,000 square foot compound. We're exploring building with FC Modular, the factory in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. The one that Mimi showed is actually Capsis. They're no longer in business. So we're expanding our relationships with our fulfillment partners. Our short-term goals have always been to build the house now better than the one we just did yesterday, and continue our relationships with the fulfillment partners. But one of our long-term goals, and we don't see when that's going to come, it keeps getting farther away, is ideally we'd have our own factory, we'd have our own dirt, we'd do the Johnny Big Bucks Siegel move. And every time I talk to him, he's like, when are you gonna wake up and change your ways? So maybe by next time, Jonathan. All right, you guys, thank you very much.